Well, my tomatoes finally started to do something this year when it cooled off. We've had one freeze so far, but I got them through it by putting a sprinkler on them for an hour or two. But it's supposed to get cold for several days now, so I'm gonna have to pick all my green ones. Anyway, I got quite a few of them. I got the sink almost full. And as you can see, this is a really deep sink. And 3 more mixing bowls full, and then some red ones. Most of the red ones are a little ugly. I'll probably use them to make some salsa. Anyway, I got my work cut out for me. What I'm gonna do with all of those, and I do every year, is make some chili verde. Normally I have about that many peppers as well, because they start going nuts this time of year too. But the deer ate them all this year, except my real hot ones. I've got a few little cayenne peppers down in there. But so I'm gonna have to buy some peppers and I'll make chili verde. And traditionally you use tomatillos, but I tried it with my leftover green tomatoes and I can't really tell much difference, so that's what I do. I'll roast these off and roast the peppers. And anyway, I'll show you, if I get time, I'll show you as I go along. This is the latest I think I've ever had to pick them. It's like November the 11th today, and we've had one freeze so far, and then nice weather after that, so it was perfect for getting these guys going. Okay, I got them all washed and the stems all taken off, and got quite a few. The red ones some of them are damaged, but I'm gonna chop them up and make some fresh salsa out of them for dinner tonight. We've got an apple pie for dessert. Anyway, tomorrow I'm gonna cut all the bad spots out and roast them off in the oven, and that'll be the start of my chili verde. As you can see, I've got
We don't have very many tomatoes.
a lot of green tomatoes to deal with, and the ones like these that are turning a little bit, you can save and they'll go ahead and ripen up, but this one is blemished. If they're blemished, they usually, like those, won't do well. So I'm gonna go ahead and make some chili verde. I normally have peppers out of the garden to clean up at the same time, but the deer ate them all this year, so I had to buy some. So I bought a bunch of peppers, and what we do is these are poblanos. I'll have the recipe in my description, but you just cut out the seeds and the stems. It's real easy. And I'll put a tray of these in the oven and roast them until they get a few little black spots on the skin. And then you take them out and put them in a bowl and cover it with saran wrap and let them steam for just a few minutes. And that helps loosen the skin up. Now on the poblanos, you don't necessarily have to take the skin off, but I'm also using Anaheims, and that's these. And I do take the skin off of these for sure, because they kind of feel like like a little piece of plastic in your food. So, but if you steam them, the skin comes right off. So anyway, I'll show you that when I get them out of the oven. And you can put them under the broiler or on, like, I've got my oven set on 500, and I just roast them. That way I don't have to keep as close a track on them. But you just roast them until they start getting little brown spots. And I'll also put the jalapeños and the tomatoes in there too. I'll show you that when I get to it. Okay, this is what the peppers look like after you roast them. And it doesn't take very long, depending on how hot your oven is. I've got mine on 500. Just keep an eye on them and don't burn them. Now you put them in a bowl and cover it with saran wrap or plastic of some sort to steam them for a little bit. Here's my second batch ready to go in. And I use quite a few jalapenos because we like ours spicy. And if you like it really spicy, you can leave the seeds and the membrane in some of your jalapenos, and that'll make it hotter too. And in the meantime, I've got these steaming in my bowl. And those will be, I'll peel those off here in just a minute. Okay, and on the tomatoes, I'm using my green tomatoes. The actual way you're supposed to use is tomatillos, but I found out that this works really nicely, and it's a good way to use up your end of the season tomato crop. So all I do is you cut them in half and take out the core, any bad spots, and then we'll do the same thing. Put them face down on the pan and roast them just like you did the peppers until they get a little bit of char on them. And that brown on the peppers and the tomatoes both, it gives it a nice flavor, gives it a little bit extra flavor. So you don't have to do that if you don't want to. Some people just boil them, but it seems like it makes it taste better. So I always go to the extra trouble of doing it. And I'll show you what the peppers do. These are the ones we roasted off, and then we steamed them a little bit, and they're still pretty hot, but you can let them cool off enough to where they're easy to handle. But the skin comes off if you've done them right, just like that. And if they're not, there's a little bit left, you can just take a knife and scrape it off. And it won't hurt. The Anaheims are the ones that I don't like the skin of, because as you can see, it's kind of like plasticky. The jalapenos I don't bother with, and the poblanos, you can pull off the loose stuff, but it doesn't really matter. You can leave it on there if you want to. And this stuff here, this dark colored stuff, where it got little char spots, really gives it a lot of flavor. So basically, I just mostly make sure I get this off the Anaheims, because if you're using them, you don't even have to use Anaheims if you don't want to, but they seem like they're kind of like plastic. Anyway, now I use a food processor, but you can use a blender or whatever you have to chop up your peppers, and you can do them however smooth or chunky that you like. We like ours with just a little bit of texture left in it. Okay, this is what your tomatoes or tomatillos should look like. It can be little brown spots on them, and they should be kind of soft and starting to get squishy. They don't have to be real squishy. And that gives them a nice roasted flavor, and also makes them a little bit easier to blend up. And then I'm mixing it all together in this big pot. Now this is a triple batch that I'm making, so if you use the recipe I've posted, you'll only have 1/3 as much of this, because I'm going to can it up and I want to have enough for a canner load. Now if you're doing this just for not going to put it in jars and can it, this salsa you add to your meat later on, because you don't want it to cook to death. But I'll show you that in a little bit. Okay, I've also added in the cilantro and the tomatoes. Not all of them, but it's a good bit of them. And you can do the same. You can make it as smooth or as chunky as you like. We like ours just with a little bit of texture. But I do grind the tomatoes up a little bit more because they have the peels. I don't want the peels to be still whole. And if you don't like cilantro, you can leave the cilantro out. Now you stir that all together. Now this won't have everything in it yet, but I like to check the heat level right now, because while I still have my oven on, I can put some more jalapenos in there if it's not hot enough. And this is about where I like it. I don't like to get it too hot, because we have company sometimes. I don't want it to be something everybody can eat. Okay, now I'm going to use some pork. I use pork loin usually because it's, fairly lean. It's easy to cut up. And I trim off the majority of the fat, because it's hard to get your jars to seal if you get too much fat. But I don't waste it. I'm going to put that in the freezer, and when Lance gets a deer, we grind it up with our deer meat when we make sausage. So cut it into bite-sized pieces, and then you'll brown it really good on all sides. Nice hot skillet. And when I get that browned up, I'm going to put it in this big pot. And you don't obviously need one this big if you're just making one batch. That's what I got. If you're going to just use it as is, you can go ahead and add your chicken stock to it after you get it browned and cook it for several hours until it's tender. I'm going to can this so I don't have to worry about it. It gets tender when it's being pressure cooked. So I skip that last step. Okay, after you get all your meat browned off, put it in the pot with the chicken stock, and you can be simmering that. And put your onions in. Now remember, I'm making a triple batch, so you won't have as many onions if you're just making a single batch. Get your onions all where they're lightly brown and translucent. So you just cook the garlic for just a few minutes. Okay, now we're going to add the oregano and the ground cumin. It'll be a half tablespoon of each. I'm putting 1.5 tablespoons because I'm doing a triple batch again. I'm going to have you all so confused. Okay, now you add the fresh lime juice, and if you are not canning it, you can go ahead and simmer it at this point for a couple, 3 hours. And while you're doing that, you can make your green chili verde. I did mine in a different order. Got my verde sauce ready to go because I'm going to can this. So at this point, I'm going to add the chili verde, the green sauce into the meat and get ready to put it in the jars. All right, I've got my jars hot and I'm filling them up. And with anything with meat in it, you got to be really careful to get the grease off of the edge of the jar. So I use a jar filler to help keep it clean to start with, because if it's greasy, it won't seal. And you don't want to fill it too full. That one got a little bit full. Because if it expands and goes up underneath the lid, then it won't seal properly either. So with meat, you usually weight it down just a little bit more than you would normally.
About like that?
Yeah. And then wipe the lid, wipe the edges really good. I usually do it twice with a wet rag and then a dry one just to be sure.
You boiled the lids?
Just get them hot.
Yeah.
I don't have to if you're doing some things, you have to sterilize the jars, but these you don't have to because I pressure it so long that it gets sterilized on the way. So if some things like green beans, maybe, you might have to sterilize the jar before you start. Just make sure they're really nice and clean. I do these in pints because that's just about the right amount for me and Lance to have a meal. That way I don't waste it.
You trust me, you don't want to waste this stuff. It's so good.
It's really good. And you do have to pressure cook this with a pressure canner, not just a kettle canner, because it has meat in it. If you were just doing the tomatillo sauce by itself without the meat, you can do it in a regular canner because it's acidic from the tomatoes. That's all there is to it, and I'll show you some more in a minute. Okay, I got my pressure cooker going. Got 18 pint jars in there, and I had about 2 pints left over, but that's okay because we'll have that for supper. And what you do, you watch the top. When it starts steaming out this little hole, put the weight on there. And this will pop up when it builds up pressure. takes it a few minutes. But we'll watch it. And what we need is 10 pounds of pressure, and we have to hold it there. We start, when it gets to 10 pounds, we start timing it. And for pints, it'll be an hour and 15 minutes. And then it will be done. We've got it holding on 10 pounds. And you have to adjust the temperature of your burner to keep it there. And it's really important that you don't leave, because it can go up or down pretty quick, and it can be dangerous if you leave it and the pressure goes too high. So find something to do. I've got plenty of things to do in here. I made a mess in my kitchen, so I'm going to be cleaning up the kitchen. Well, here's the results of yesterday's project. Got 18 pint jars of chili verde. This is awesome to make little nachos or to put with some nice homemade tortillas, or you can even make enchiladas out of it if you want to. But this is how you tell if they're sealed. You can look to make sure the top is dented in, but here's a good way too. Just tap them with a spoon. They'll make a nice high-pitched sound. If they make a dull thud, either the stuff is stuck on the top or they're not sealed good. So, and with meat, I usually keep them on the counter and check them a couple more times, because one time I had a couple that let loose after a couple days because I got some oil up underneath the edge. I was really careful with these, so I'm pretty sure they're all good. Okay, well, here's the results of my marathon canning project. I did 62 pints of chili verde. I've given 8 of them away already. And I also finished out a canner load. I had a few spaces left, so I did some black beans. The one with white lids there are the black beans. They turned out really nice. I was trying out my new reusable canner lids, and I didn't want to use them on the meat until I tried it out, because I want to make sure I was getting them to seal right. But everything's sealed, so they did good. I'm pretty happy with that. Anyway, so that's more than, each one of these is just about enough for me and Lance to make some really nice green chili nachos or some enchiladas. So that's a whole year's worth of chili verde. It's a good way, really good way to use up your green tomatoes.